Today, let's have a look at what firearms the Amish use, what they hunt, and how they use them. But first, let's clear up some misconceptions about the Amish. This is a very diverse sect of people. Though most communities can be found in the northeastern parts of the US, they aren't by any means limited to those areas. Small pockets can be found as far as south of Florida. Of the nearly 400,000 Amish in the United States, they have an enormous scope of what they accept and what they do not. The very strict ones don't condone firearms at all and only allow their food to come from the farm. But they're in the minority. Most do allow firearms for hunting and pest control. As much as they enjoy hunting and take great care of their guns, the use of firearms is strictly reserved for necessity. There's also some disbelief around women being allowed to hunt. Yes, it's rare for girls to pick up a rifle, but there are sects that are more accepting of this. It seems that the biggest misconception of all revolves around whether or not the Amish go on extended hunting trips to hunt big game, as well as what kind of weapons they do use when they do. To put it simply, they absolutely go on big game hunts. But no single community does it the same way. Just like their views on modern conveniences, politics, and even their religious views, every single community differs from the next. Even the very progressive sects draw the line at certain places though. You won't find pistols or automatic weapons among their hunters. But as you might not have noticed, the Amish aren't nearly as rigid and unwilling to make allowances when it needs to be made. The rules all depend on necessity and a community's preferences. And just as all of us have judged the Amish by putting them all into the same box, you can bet that the Amish communities do the same amongst each other too. With all that said, let's put our idealized opinions aside and look at some of the weapons most commonly used. According to statistics anyways. Crossbows. Crossbows are actually quite popular among the younger members of the community and families, and this is also where the girls are most likely to join in on the fun. Targets are often found in backyards so that the kids can do a bit of target practice under their parents' tutelage. The Amish prefer the crossbow over the compound bow. Crossbows are quieter, easier to master, and they don't need Olympian muscles to pull back a string. When it's used to hunt, it's usually small to medium-sized animals that are hunted with a bow, and the teenagers that are too young to go on hunting trips are tasked with keeping small predators away from the chicken coop. It's a great way to get your shooting eye trained from a young age, and to keep things running smoothly on the farm by giving some of the older boys a little responsibility. Here on the channel, we are big fans of crossbows, and not just because they look badass. Tracking anything on foot is going to force you how to learn to be quiet. The basics of tracking and stalking are just as important as gun maintenance in our opinion, and those skills aren't learned nearly as well with the big weapons fitted with the best scopes and attachments. 22 caliber. The first rifle any boy is most likely to be entrusted with is a 22, and it's probably going to be the rifle that they end up using the most during their entire lives. 22s are incredibly handy around any farm setting. Any pest can be dealt with very little noise and with ammunition that's readily available. We're talking birds, coons, cats, rats, hares, whatever's nibbling on the corn or trying to bother the chickens will get sorted out right with a trusty 22. That's why almost every Amish household has at least one. It's undoubtedly the most popular rifle of all our options today. Small game for the dinner table can be hunted with them, and young men are often tasked with supplying dinner for the family. When it comes to small game, the 22 is incredibly versatile and effective. The rule is, if a young man can prove that he can hunt with and properly maintain this low-caliber rifle, the simplest of all firearms, then he's earned the right to graduate to bigger rifles. But our favorite aspect of starting your firearms journey with a 22 is the same with the crossbows. Bringing down small game is harder than the big animals in many ways. If you can spot a hare's tracks on the ground, then there's no way a moose will escape you. And if you can whack those notoriously swift and sneaky raccoons, then really, the world's your oyster. 22s come in a wide range of prices and round capacity, but we'd advise you to keep it simple. These are more utilitarian weapons than they are hunting rifles, and you'll most likely end up using yours more for the purposes of pest control and target practice than you will to hunt any significant-sized game. But you can still bring down a deer if you're in a pinch. Shotguns. Shotguns are the second most common firearm owned by the Amish, and that's for the simple reason that they shoot shells that disperse several pellets in a wider radius than a single bullet can. Sure, coyotes, rodents, and even cougars can be handled with these guns, but they're especially useful to control birds. Bird pressure in crop fields is one of the most destructive pests to have on your hands, and the only way to really get ahead of them is with a shotgun. They're almost as commonly found in homes as the .22 is. Their use as a bird eradicator should also give you a clue as to how they're most often used in hunting. Grouse, ducks, and quail are best hunted with the low-gauge shotguns. But the Amish aren't just limited to the low-gauge kinds. It's just that the bigger ones used to hunt deer or wild boar are reserved for hunting trips and not for daily use. Obviously, we prefer shotguns because they're so versatile in areas that the Amish would not approve of. For example, self-defense is a concern for most of our viewers. And just because the Amish don't use them for that purpose doesn't mean you can't. Whether you're interested in self-sufficiency, hunting, home defense, or all-out war, shotguns are going to give you the most use from a single firearm out of everything that's at your disposal. As far as sales go, the Amish seem to prefer the Winchester Pump Action 12 and the Remington 10s. Not surprising, since both models are very reliable, simple, and relatively inexpensive. And now it's time for the bigger hunting rifles. But before we get into the big boys, why don't you do us a solid and hit that like button and subscribe while you're at it? Or alternatively, you can support us directly through the link in the description. Guys, we can see a lot of you aren't subscribed yet, but still watch the friggin' videos. We're not angry, we're just disappointed. You're gonna miss out on all of the great videos we have lined up. So make sure you hit that subscribe button. If you're already watching us anyways, wouldn't that just be a win-win? Okay, sorry, I'm getting a little worked up. But if we can learn anything from the Amish, it's that community is the cornerstone to any movement. So seriously, drop your comments below, recommend us videos, and friggin' subscribe. Now back to the video. Big game hunting rifles. When it comes to big game hunting, there's nothing that's off the table. Moose, deer, and yes, even massive bears are hunted on occasion. The northern Amish communities are known for their long hunting trips that stretch all the way into the Canadian wilderness. Those Amish that do go on extended hunting trips are also willing to put away their suspenders in exchange for camouflage until they return to the farm. In places where winters are colder and longer, they've had to adopt these far-reaching hunting expeditions to keep them supplied when nothing can be grown for months in the winter. So from a practical standpoint, we can totally see why this exception was made to keep fresh meat available all year long. For bigger game, muzzle loaders are very popular, and despite how complicated it seems, it really isn't. It just forces you to consider every individual shot you take more intently if you need to manually pull over after every round. No matter what you're hunting, anything larger than a deer is going to require a caliber above .270. It really is a very mixed bag when it comes to the Amish and their rifle preferences, though we can say with certainty that they really like their .308 muzzle loaders. And the .338s also come up a few times. A monster like the .338 is going to cover all of your bases. Deer, moose, elk, and bear are all hunted with it. But on the rare occasion that a gun this powerful is procured for the purposes of hunting, it's never just for a weekend deer hunting expedition. The Amish would only spend money on such a weapon if they're going out far and coming back with enough meat to supply the community. Personally, we prefer the .308 for big game hunting. It can bring down a bear if you really need it to. But let's face it, not a lot of us are going out to hunt grizzlies anyways. It's a much more manageable rifle to work with. There's also a lot more room in terms of cool attachments for those of us who aren't too hung up on keeping things simple. Look, if you're gonna take away anything from the Amish and their firearm preferences, it's that every weapon has a purpose. Choose your firearms according to what it is you need them to do, not just for the fun of it. We can also learn from them that tracking, maintenance, and responsible gun ownership comes before anything else. The Amish really aren't all that different from us, just like their wide range of firearms goes to show. So get out there and start learning how to feed yourself, protect your crops, and maybe even defend yourself if it's necessary. Until next time, this is Threat to Survival. Prepare today, thrive tomorrow. Embrace the threat to survival.